Well, in our study of biology, we've looked at how cells work together to make tissue. And we've so far covered muscle and epithelial cells. But now we're going to look at nervous tissue and connective tissue. Both of them are very interesting. We can start with nervous tissue because that's one of my favorites. Nervous tissue has a very linear structure. And of all of the four tissue types, it is the one that communicates the most. Of course, they all communicate. You remember that epithelial cells were releasing nitric oxide to communicate to the blood vessels in order to control blood pressure. But nervous tissue is the one that really does a lot of the more interesting jobs of communication. Nerves, for example, a type of nervous tissue, carry actual electrical signals down their very long and slender structures, and they're just like wires. So they need insulation to keep the electricity from leaking out. This insulation in nerves is called myelin, and it is made from multiple layers of lipid bilayer. Other nervous tissues are there to help the nerves do their function and to release special transmitters and communicating molecules. Connective tissue is the fourth and final type of tissue type, and it covers everything from blood to bones. It's a catch-all for a lot of different kinds of tissue. The thing that they all have in common is they have cells surrounded by lots of matrix. In blood, the matrix is a liquid, so that's why it doesn't really seem like a connective type of thing, because it doesn't really connect. But other things like bones and tendons have cells surrounded by another type of matrix. For example, in tendons, you have fibroblast cells, and they are surrounded by a matrix of collagen, which they make themselves and put out around themselves to make those nice, strong tendons. Fibroblasts make and maintain the collagen, which makes up 80% of tendon. And in fact, collagen, which is a protein chain, is the most prevalent protein in animals. So it's a very important protein in our bodies and in bodies of other animals. Well, let's look back now at nerves and think of a little activity that helps us understand how nerves work. Could you make a long-distance communication device with just a string and some cans? Probably can imagine how that might look. What challenges would you have to overcome in order to get this tin can telephone to operate? What challenges are there in general for all of long-distance transmission of signals? And how do nerves overcome those same kind of challenges? That's a good question to ask yourself. A story I like to tell about nerves that we've hinted at before is that because nerves are so long, diffusion is super, super slow. It's order of magnitudes longer than the lifetime of the universe to transport a typical little lipid vesicle from one end of the nerve to another. So all eukaryotic cells have to have transport systems for vesicles and other organelles. And nerves need this transport system more than any other cell because they're so long and skinny too. The transport system requires tracks and motors that walk along those tracks. And the motor kinesin that we've mentioned a few times looks like a little human as it walks along the microtubule tracks from one end of the cell to the other. You should get online and look at a picture of that because it's just absolutely amazing. If you're going a little deeper, now's the time to read again about how cells are arranged, especially in connective tissue, and how cells are arranged in nervous tissue. So these are the leafs that will teach you about nervous tissue and connective tissue. And remember that blood is classified by some people as a connective tissue, but it's very different.